Incest is an awful topic to have to discuss, yet it happens to 1 in 5 Australian children, and I am one of those. Incest happens when a trusted family member grooms the victim and their family. Grooming is intentional manipulation on behalf of the perpetrator. This means that the perpetrator knows exactly what they are doing and works to manipulate the family so they don't suspect what's going on. The act of incest and grooming is set up to silence and confuse the victim and their family members. In a child's mind, this confusion can translate into, it must be my fault that my relative is doing these things to me. And it is never, ever the child's fault. For me, as a child and teenager, I became hypervigilant and acutely anxious. I was always trying to stay a step ahead of the perpetrator so he couldn't get his hands on me. My distress levels were off the charts, especially when I was left in his care, and the worst when my parents left us with him for 6 weeks when they went on holiday. There was nowhere really that was a safe place anymore, and from a very young age, everything became about survival. I began to cry a lot at school, and nobody could work out what was wrong with me. I couldn't tolerate any change, and I started to pull away from my friends. I judged myself harshly, felt very dirty and undeserving, and special occasions, such as a first love interest in a young woman's life, were met with jealousy and rejection from the perpetrator. When I told about the abuse, it shattered my family, and any stability I had began to rapidly fall apart. The incest became a catalyst for my parents' marriage breakdown and later divorce. Members of my family were filled with horrifying levels of guilt over what the perpetrator had done and still do to this day. A lot of my extended family members rejected the news of the abuse, and my family were left to deal with it on their own. Life was never the same again. I love family and the extended family life, and it was completely gone in a very short period of time. My family went into total chaos. All other issues I dealt with were exacerbated, which just made it all the harder to see some way out of this confusion. I did have some very great experiences in these years, but all were tainted by the actions of the perpetrator. I was seeing a Freudian psychiatrist from 16 years on and off till I was 21 years of age. During this time, I wanted to focus more on the incest, but the psychiatrist was not able to refer me to anyone to be able to do this. He also told me that I wouldn't cope if I stopped seeing him. I did eventually leave and found a place called Dimpner House that held small group counselling for victims of incest. It was very confronting but healing in a lot of ways, especially hearing other members' stories. When I finished that group, I needed some substitute support, and I accessed the Women's Health Centre's Rape Crisis Phone Counselling line, who also supported women who experienced incest. They became my lifeline for the next 20 years of my life, for which I am eternally grateful. During my early 20s, I began to experience suicide ideation and was referred to a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with dissociation. This psychiatrist informed me that if I didn't get help, I would end up on the streets eating out of bins. Even though this could have been said to me in a more gentle fashion, it was true what she said, because even though I didn't end up on the streets, I was not far from it. Along with other issues, the dissociation and other effects of the incest, it made it near impossible to secure work. This did improve as I started getting help, but it took a long time to find appropriate or consistent help. During this time, I educated myself the best I could. I saw different therapists, read books, and attended many workshops to learn skills to be able to manage the effects of the grooming and abuse, communicate effectively, set boundaries, and give myself self-care. The more debilitated I became, the more desperate I wished to become an effective part of the community. I still had my love of life, but with the increased physical and mental health symptoms, the further away this reality became. I did share some living spaces with people, but I ended up living more and more on my own, which only made the debilitation worse, and the depression, anxiety, rumination, and loneliness were crippling. I did manage to get some work along the way, but I chose hard physical work, and my body was in no condition to take this on. I suffered massive performance anxiety and panic attacks during and after work, which was like a mild form of torture, but I did it. I had lost and got rejected from many employment training programs, but I am proud of myself for how I persevered in trying to secure work. This went on for most of my 20s, 30s, and 40s. The incest had locked me in a cage, but I was determined to break it down so that I could experience the freedom I could see that existed outside of it. In my 20s and 30s, I existed on $175 a fortnight after I had paid my rent, and my appearance and body image began to strongly reflect that. I came from a middle-class family, but asking for help was not easy to do or at all. I took the perpetrator to court in my 20s, and he was acquitted, but again, I am very proud of myself for doing this. I sort of got my own justice on the court day by looking directly at the perpetrator, who was unable to meet my gaze even once. Despite the baggage and effects I was carrying from the incest, I did manage to participate in friendships to the best of my ability. I love animals, nature, dance, movement, and film and performance theatre. I became involved in festival activities, as hard and confronting and triggering as it was. It is important to point out that I was still me through all of this. I had my own personality in life just like everyone else, even if it may look very different. Having said that, as I got older, I felt I had less and less dignity and choice. It was very demoralising, shameful, and humiliating. I had to endure a lot of victim blaming from people close and far from me due to denial and/or ignorance or shame. It is now in my 49th year of life that I am receiving treatment and support that is consistent and abundant to me. I am very weary, but I am doing my best to persevere, as things are starting to improve in ways I have hoped they would for many years. Today, as a result of all the work I've done on myself and the love I've been given, I do feel more lovable, worthwhile, compassionate, and accepting towards myself. This also includes my sexuality and body image, which are getting a little stronger. Incest leaves a legacy that has long-term effects and is made worse when not resolved, stopped, or talked about. If it is not resolved, it leaves the victim with a huge burden to carry on their own. So I would encourage everyone, family members and friends, to talk about it so that victims can have a chance at remaining close to their families and receiving the loving embrace the family unit can give. And also, the victims and survivors can receive the highly skilled, consistent, long-term treatment and support they deserve. This is my brave. Thank you for sharing this time with me.